This is one of my notebooks that I filled it up with so many words that I heard here and there when I was learning English. Now, you'll presumably think this is what got me thinking English and how I became fluent in English. But no, this is not the case. I had to rack my brains to remember anything and I would get stuck on words. And when I wanted to say something, I would always translate something from my native language into the English language, which as a result of that, my speech was so slow and unnatural because English, like any other language, has its own sentence structure. So, because English was so difficult, I quit. I didn't want to learn English anymore. But more interestingly, a year later, I caught up with learning English again. But this time, English was so easy for me. All of a sudden, English structure made a whole lot of sense to me. So much so that when I wanted to say something or when I wanted to express myself, I wouldn't translate things from my native language into the English language. I was naturally thinking in English. Why English that had been so difficult for me? After a year of being aware of that, English suddenly became so easy and I were able to think in English. Now, if I right away tell you why exactly that worked for me, you wouldn't get what I mean. You won't relate what I'm going to say. So first, let me tell you the first step that you need to think in English and then we'll come back to my story. Alright, let's go. When it comes to thinking in English, everyone tells you that first start with making small sentences and then think in individual words and you will get into the habit of thinking in English. But your main problem is that you do not know how to make your sentences in the way that English sentences are structured. So how come you can suddenly ask your brain to get into English mode and then produce the English sentences the way that English sentences are structured? You need more than that. It seems that the very first step is missing, doesn't it? So at first, you need massive amount of input to receive information of the English language and internalize it without making the effort of making your own sentences or writing down anything. Just sit down, relax, and observe the information, receive the information. So in basic terms, you need to read or listen to the English language, right? So it works like that. You get input, you read or listen to the English language. If you understand it, it will get stored in your brain. More specifically, it will get stored in the part of your brain that is responsible for the language. So when you want to produce your own sentences, your brain looks for a sentence that you've heard or read before. A sentence that matches the meaning that you want to express. And then your brain produces the same one or the similar one. This process is unconscious and that happens automatically because by listening and reading, you've given your brain thousands of English sentences. So it'll be easier to use English, right? Because your brain will repeating the same thing that has seen many times. Alright, now to prove that, let's get back to my story. I'd been learning English for a long time and then English had been so difficult for me and then I quit. But a year later, I caught up with learning English. But this time, English was so easy for me. Easy peasy, right? So what exactly happened during that gap year between quitting and catching up? During that gap year, like everyone else, I had to do some activities for fun and for pleasure. My hobbies include reading books and watching movies, among many other things which there's no point to be mentioned. Books and movies stir up my emotions and they help me to escape from real life for a few hours. And sometimes they are great distraction from everything that is going on. So honestly, during that gap year, I watched more than 100 movies. Not too much, 3 movies in a week, and I watched all of them in English. Why did I watch all that movies in English if I didn't want to learn English? Well, because I'm a big fan of Hollywood cinema and I'm a big fan of Leonardo DiCaprio and Meryl Streep, right? So I didn't watch the movies that were dubbed because I wanted to listen to their real voice and feel the emotion that is in their voice. In addition to that, I don't like dub movies at all because dub movies lose the feel and the soul of the original movies. So that's why I watched all the movies in English. I was lucky and my obsession really worked here. But the point is that I watched all the movies for the purpose of entertainment. It's funny how my brain works. If it had been for the purpose of learning English, I definitely would have quit because I would have written down every single word that I see, and that would have taken me too long to write down every single word, and then I wouldn't have been able to watch so many movies, and my brain wouldn't have had the opportunity to see some sentences so many times to produce its own sentences. So I was lucky that I watched all that movies for the purpose of entertainment. So I just sat down and received the information of the English language. I absorbed it, which basically all that knowledge got accumulated in my head, they got stored in my brain. And then when it was the time that I wanted to use English, I wanted to express myself, my brain would provide me with the English sentences that I've heard before. And this is why after a year of being away of English became so easy for me, and I could make a whole lot of sense of English structure. So you got the idea. Feed your brain with passive knowledge. Watch English movies, read English books, and listen to English podcasts, which there's a study that says watching movies is easier to understand because it helps and assists your comprehension by enabling you to listen to language exchanges and see such supports as facial expressions and gestures simultaneously happening at the same time. And all that visual clues that we see in the movies, they kind of support the verbal messages and make us more focused and pay attention. And we can make more connection with the language that is spoken in the movies. When we communicate with people, we usually talk about what we've done recently or what we are doing right now. So to build the habit of thinking English and stop translating in your head, it would be great exercise to start with describing your actions. And it could be as simple as, I'm blowing my gum, or we're blowing our gums. Actually, I have a video on describing actions, so it would be a great lesson for you if you want to start describing actions and if you want to stop translating in your head. So I'll put a link to that in the description below, so make sure to check that next. At this point, you might notice that some words are at the tip of your tongue. I mean, you're almost, but not quite able to bring a particular word to mind, which is totally normal. Take your time to recall it. And if you're not sure about it, go ahead and check it. And while you're doing this exercise, you'll definitely come across a word that you have no idea what is it called in English. Well, in this case, you can look it up in the translating dictionary, but look it up in the English only dictionary as well. And make sure to look at its sample sentences. It shows you how to use it in the sentence and how to connect it with other words and with the proper grammar structures. Guys, if you want to learn English, you have to be friends with an English dictionary. A dictionary is a great resource for learning a correct pronunciation of a word, the definition of a word, and they can show you how to use a word in the context. On the whole, a dictionary is a great friend. While you're doing this action, you'll definitely need to name objects that you are using. For example, see? So I described the action and I also named the object that I was using. So to make better sentences, make sure to learn the English name for the objects that are around you and you use them every day. And as you continue with this, it becomes more of a habit and things are going to pop up in your head. Step number 3, have a small conversation with yourself, like the one that you have with your friends. Talk about what you've done recently or what are you going to do. Talk about your future plans. In this way, you're able to use longer sentences and you are training your brain to talk about different time, about the present, the past, and the future, which if you learn it, it's wonderful. If you learn how to switch from one time tense to another, you will take a huge leap in your ability how to think in English and how to stop translating in your head. And again, if you come across a word that you don't know, go ahead and ask your friend dictionary. And I want you to do it every day, even if it's a short conversation, but do it, right? Do not take a day off because you can't pick it up in a day or a few days. It's a slow process. So you have to be determined and do it every day. That was from me. If you have any questions related to this lesson or to English, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below. Alright guys, I hope that you really liked this video. If so, give it a thumbs up. It really helps with me and with my channel. Alright guys, I love you. Bye.